It was past midnight in Delhi. The city had fallen into that rare silence that comes only after a long day. The streets were almost empty. The air carried a soft chill, and somewhere far away, a faint sound of a train echoed. In a quiet corner of his home, Narendra Modi sat in his study, staring at a small piece of paper on his desk. It was folded many times, as if handled over and over again. He had read the words written on it earlier that evening, and they refused to leave his mind. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of the day pressing on him. His schedule had been full: meetings, discussions, decisions, but none of it had shaken him like this single memory had. He thought of a person he had met years ago, in a situation so simple yet so powerful that it had shaped his view on kindness forever. The memory had returned tonight because of something he had just learned, news that connected that old moment with a present challenge. Without overthinking, he reached for his phone. It was late, much too late to call someone for casual conversation, but he knew this could not wait until morning. His fingers moved quickly, finding a familiar name: Sundar Pichai. He hesitated for just a second, wondering if the CEO of one of the world's biggest tech companies might be asleep in California. But the urgency in his heart overpowered his doubt. He pressed the call button. Miles away, Sundar was in his home office, working on something that could change the way millions interacted with technology. His desk was neat, except for a single cup of half-finished tea. When his phone buzzed, he glanced at it. Seeing the name, he sat up straighter. He knew Modi rarely called him directly, and never at this hour. "Hello, sir," Sundar answered, his voice calm but curious. "Is everything all right?" There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause that carries weight. Then Modi spoke softly. "Sundar, I need to ask you something, but before that, I must tell you why." In those few words, Sundar felt a shift. This was not going to be a business matter or a polite exchange. This was personal. Modi began to share the story of a small village far from the city, where a boy had once helped him in a way that left a mark on his soul. The boy had nothing, yet he had given something priceless: his time, his care, and his belief in helping without expecting anything back. As Modi spoke, Sundar could hear the faint tremor in his voice, as if the memory was alive even now. "That boy," Modi continued, "is now a man. And today, I learned he is in trouble. Not the kind of trouble that makes headlines, but the kind that quietly breaks a person's spirit. I have tried to help, but there is something he needs that only you might be able to provide." Sundar leaned forward, his mind racing. He wanted to ask questions, but he stayed silent, letting Modi speak. There was a sense of urgency, but also a deep, emotional current running through the words. Sundar could feel this was not about politics, business, or image. This was about one human reaching out to another, across time and circumstance, for the sake of someone forgotten by the world. Then Modi's tone changed, softer but firmer. "I know it is late. I know this is not your responsibility, but if you hear the full story, you will understand why I am calling you tonight." Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the window. Sundar looked at the clock. It was 1:12 a.m. in Delhi, just past lunchtime in California. He set his pen down, giving his full attention. "Tell me, sir," he said quietly. "I'm listening." And with that, Modi began to tell the deeper truth, one that would lead Sundar into a journey. Neither of them could have imagined a journey that would test their patience, their empathy, and their belief in what it truly means to help someone without expecting anything in return. Modi's voice grew steadier as he spoke, but the weight in his tone did not fade. "It was many years ago," he began. "I was traveling through rural Gujarat, visiting small villages. It was summer, the heat was harsh, and the journey had been long. My vehicle broke down halfway between two villages, and there was no one in sight for miles. I had to walk along a dusty road, hoping to find help." He paused, as if seeing it again in his mind. After about an hour, I reached a small settlement. There were no big shops, no proper houses, just a few huts, and children playing with makeshift toys. I asked if there was someone who could guide me to the nearest town. A boy, no older than 12, stepped forward. His clothes were worn, but his eyes were full of confidence. Sundar could almost picture it. He told me to wait, Modi continued. Then he ran inside one of the huts and brought me a clay pot of water. He said it was the cleanest they had, saved for guests. I drank it, and he smiled as if he had just done something important. Then he offered to walk with me to the next town, even though it meant leaving his game and his friends. Modi's voice softened further. On that walk, I learned he lived with his grandmother. His parents had passed away when he was little. He worked in the fields after school, and sometimes before, to help earn a little money. But he told me something that has never left my mind. He said, "Bapu, even if we have little, it feels good to help someone who needs it." There was a silence between the two men on the call. Sundar's mind returned to his own childhood in Chennai, where small acts of kindness had often carried more weight than any gift. Years passed, Modi said, breaking the silence. I kept thinking of that boy. I tried to find him a few times, but life kept pulling me in different directions. Then today, someone from that area told me he is struggling. His grandmother passed away last month. He is trying to keep their small piece of land, but a dispute has left him without income. And there is one more thing. His younger sister is very sick. She needs treatment in a city hospital. The costs are far beyond what he can pay. Sundar's hand tightened on his phone. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said quietly. Modi took a deep breath. "I have already arranged for some local help. But the hospital where she can get the right treatment is in a different state. They do not have the connections or resources to make it happen quickly. I thought of you because you have always understood that technology and networks are not just for business, they can be lifelines." Sundar remained silent for a moment. It was not the request he expected, but it was one he could not ignore. Modi's next words were slow and deliberate. "Sundar, I am not asking for charity. I am asking if you can help open the right doors, the way you would for someone in your own family. I will handle everything else, but I know your reach can make a difference in hours instead of weeks." Outside Sundar's window, the afternoon light was shifting, casting long shadows on his desk. He looked at his tea had gone cold, but in that moment, he felt something warm inside him. "Sir," he said, "tell me everything I need to know. We will make this happen." There was a quiet thank you from Modi, but it carried the weight of sincerity. Neither of them knew yet that helping this one man would set off a chain of events far bigger than either of them imagined. As soon as the call ended, Sundar sat in silence for a moment. He was used to solving complex problems that involved billions of dollars and teams spread across the globe. Yet, this helping one man in a small Indian village felt just as urgent, maybe even more. There was no press release, no public announcement, just a promise made in the quiet of a late-night call. He opened his laptop and began searching for hospitals near the location Modi had mentioned. The closest facility capable of treating the girl's condition was in Ahmedabad, but their waiting list was long. The second option was in Mumbai. Better equipment, better specialists, but also higher costs and complicated paperwork for patients from outside the city. He sent a quick message to one of his contacts in India, a hospital administrator he had once met during a charity project. The reply came within minutes. "We can help, but we need the patient's details, and we must move quickly." Sundar called Modi back immediately. "Sir, I need someone close to the boy to get me all the medical documents. Also, if he has a phone that can use email or WhatsApp, I can guide him directly." Modi's voice was calm but urgent. "I will make sure it happens tonight." What neither of them knew was that time was even shorter than they thought. In the small village, the boy A young man named Anil sat outside his hut, under the dim light of a lantern. His sister Kavya was inside, her breathing shallow. He had gone to the nearest clinic that morning, but the doctor had told him she needed advanced treatment immediately. Every passing hour made her weaker. Anil held an old mobile phone in his hands, one of the few things he had bought second-hand from the city. It rang unexpectedly. The number was unfamiliar. When he answered, a polite voice on the other end introduced himself as Sundar Pichai. "I heard about your sister," Sundar began. "We are going to get her the help she needs." Anil didn't know what to say. "Sir, we have no money for travel, no relatives in the city." "How will? Don't worry about that," Sundar said gently. "Just listen carefully. I will arrange transport, and the hospital will be ready when you arrive. I only need you to gather her medical papers and be ready to leave by morning." As the call ended, Anil felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Why would a man so far away care about his sister? He didn't know that somewhere in Delhi, the Prime Minister himself had remembered him from a dusty road years ago. That night, while Kavya slept, Anil packed a small bag with her clothes and the documents. Outside, a storm began to build on the horizon. The wind grew stronger, carrying the smell of rain. The journey ahead was uncertain, but something inside him whispered that help was truly coming. What none of them knew was that the storm would not only bring rain, it would bring the first of many obstacles that could stop them before they even reached the hospital. Before dawn, the rain had already begun. Heavy drops pounded on the tin roof of Anil's hut, and the narrow dirt path outside had turned into a slippery stream of mud. Anil woke up early, hoping the weather would ease, but the sound of the storm told him otherwise. He checked on Kavya. Her skin was pale, her breathing uneven. Every moment felt like sand slipping through his fingers. He thought of the words from the night before, "Be ready by morning," and knew there was no choice. They had to leave, storm or not. Just as he was wrapping Kavya in a warm shawl, a loud horn echoed outside. He stepped into the rain and saw a white Jeep waiting. Inside was a driver sent by a local contact of Modi's. "We have to move now," the driver shouted over the rain. The road to the highway might close soon. Anil carried Kavya in his arms and placed her gently inside the Jeep. The driver pushed the accelerator, and the vehicle began its slow climb along the narrow village road. Rainwater splashed against the windshield, and every turn felt dangerous. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, Sundar was tracking their journey through updates from Modi's team. He had already confirmed with the Mumbai hospital that the doctors would be ready as soon as Kavya arrived. But as the minutes passed, the updates slowed. Then a message came in that made his chest tighten. "The main bridge to the highway is flooded back." In the Jeep, the driver stopped abruptly. In front of them, muddy water rushed over the bridge, carrying branches and debris. Villagers stood nearby, shaking their heads. "We can't cross this," the driver said. "It's too dangerous." Anil looked at the water, then at his sister, who was shivering under the blanket. "We have to," he said firmly, but the driver didn't move. Just then, a man in a raincoat walked over. "There's an old railway crossing 2 kilometers east," he said. "If you take that path, you might reach the highway. But it's rough, and with this rain—" He didn't finish his sentence. Anil turned to the driver. "Please, let's try. We can't wait." The Jeep turned onto the narrow side path, bouncing over rocks and dipping into waterlogged sections. Every bump made Kavya wince softly, and Anil's heart ached. He held her hand tightly, whispering, "We'll get there, I promise." As they struggled forward, Sundar sat by his phone, waiting for the next update. Modi, too, was awake, following every detail. Both men, powerful in their own worlds, now felt the helplessness of being far away when every second counted. By the time the Jeep finally reached the highway, the rain had eased slightly, but the delay had cost them 2 precious hours. The driver stepped on the accelerator. The race to the hospital was far from over, and another, even bigger challenge waited ahead. One that neither Anil, Sundar, nor Modi could have seen coming. The jeep sped down the highway, its tires cutting through puddles of rainwater. The sky was still heavy with clouds, but the downpour had softened into a steady drizzle. Anil kept checking on Kavya, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Every now and then, she whispered something too faint to hear, and he would gently squeeze her hand. After almost 2 hours on the road, they came to an abrupt halt. Ahead, traffic was backed up as far as the eye could see. Drivers stood outside their vehicles, talking in anxious tones. The driver of the jeep leaned out the window to ask what was happening. Moments later, he turned to Anil, his face tense. There's been a landslide further ahead. The road is completely blocked. They say it could take hours to clear. Anil's chest tightened. Hours. She doesn't have hours. The driver shook his head helplessly. There's nothing we can do. The other route will take half a day. Anil stepped out into the drizzle, his shoes sinking into the soft mud at the side of the road. He looked at the long line of vehicles, the endless stretch of blocked highway, and then back at the jeep where Kavya lay weak and pale. He felt the same helplessness he had seen in his grandmother's eyes when they couldn't afford medicine years ago. Just then, his phone rang. It was Sundar. Anil, I heard about the landslide, Sundar said, his voice sharp with urgency. Listen to me carefully. There's a small airstrip about 40 kilometers from your location. I've arranged for an air ambulance to meet you there. Can the driver take you? Anil turned to the driver, who hesitated. Sir, that road is narrow and damaged from the rain. It's risky. Anil didn't hesitate. We'll take it. The jeep made a sudden turn, leaving the line of stranded vehicles behind. The road they entered was indeed narrow, barely enough for one vehicle, and parts of it were eroded from the storm. They drove slowly, avoiding deep potholes and fallen branches. As they neared the airstrip, a new problem arose. The rain had picked up again, and the small strip of land was partially flooded. The pilot of the air ambulance radioed in. We can land if the water doesn't rise further. But we have minutes, not hours. Anil lifted Kavya in his arms as soon as they stopped. The pilot and a medic rushed over, covering them with a rain sheet. As they moved toward the small aircraft, Anil looked back at the jeep driver, who gave him a thumbs up. Go. Save her, the man shouted over the rain. Minutes later, the plane lifted off, the ground disappearing beneath them. Anil sat beside his sister, holding her hand while the medic checked her vitals. His heart was racing, not from the flight, but from the fear that they might still be too late. In Mumbai, the doctors were waiting. In Delhi, Modi was watching for the update, and in California, Sundar sat at his desk, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the screen, willing every second to pass faster. None of them knew that what would happen in the hospital next would test all their hope and strength. In a way none of them were ready for. The air ambulance touched down in Mumbai, just as the sun was breaking through the clouds. For the first time in days, there was light. Anil didn't notice the skyline or the bustle of the city. His eyes stayed on Kavya, whose breathing had grown shallow. The moment they landed, the hospital team was already waiting on the tarmac. The medics transferred her onto a stretcher and rushed her through the emergency entrance. Anil ran beside them, clutching her hand until they reached the operating wing, where a nurse stopped him gently. You can't go beyond this point, she said softly. We'll do everything we can. Anil stood frozen, watching the doors swing shut. He had never felt so powerless. He sat in the waiting area, his clothes still damp from the rain, his hands trembling. In Delhi, Modi sat in his office, not looking at his papers, only at the clock. In California, Sundar kept his phone on speaker while answering emails, waiting for any news. 3 men, in 3 different places, all connected by a single hope. After what felt like hours, a doctor emerged. His expression was serious, but calm. She's stable for now, he said. We managed to stop the infection from spreading, but the next 48 hours are critical. If her body responds well, she has a real chance. Anil felt the strength return to his legs. He thanked the doctor repeatedly, tears filling his eyes. Later that evening, Sundar called him directly. She's strong, Sundar said. She's already fought this far. I know she'll make it. Anil didn't know how to respond. Finally, he said, Sir, you don't even know us. Why did you help? There was a pause on the line before. Sundar replied, Someone once helped me when I had nothing. I can't repay them, but I can pass it forward. And in your case, it was not just me. Someone else remembered you from years ago. Anil was silent, confused. The next day when Kavya was resting peacefully, Anil received a call from an unknown number. He answered, and a familiar, warm voice greeted him. Anil, do you remember giving water to a stranger on a dusty road many years ago? His breath caught in his chest. Bapu. On the other end, Narendra Modi chuckled softly. You didn't know it then, but that day, your kindness stayed with me. Now it was my turn to make sure someone else remembered you too. Anil's eyes welled up. I only did what anyone should do. And that, Modi said, is why it mattered. 2 days later, the doctors confirmed that Kavya's condition was improving. She would recover fully with proper care. As Anil stood by her bedside, he realized that kindness, whether on a dusty road or in the middle of the night, could travel farther than anyone imagined. Far away, Sundar and Modi exchanged a short message. She's going to be fine. Sometimes, the smallest act in the past becomes the greatest rescue in the future. Weeks passed, and the monsoon season slowly faded into clear skies. Kavya was discharged from the hospital, her smile returning little by little each day. She still had to visit for follow-up checkups, but the worst was over. Anil had found work in the city, thanks to contacts. Sundar quietly arranged through one of his teams in India. One afternoon, as they sat in a small park near the hospital, Kavya asked her brother Baya, who helped us. I know you didn't have that kind of money. Who paid for everything? Anil smiled softly. Someone far away, and someone else who remembered me from long ago. He didn't go into details, because to him, the names didn't matter as much as the lesson. They helped because they could. And one day, we will do the same for someone else. A few days later, Anil received an invitation. It was simple, handwritten, and bore the seal of the Prime Minister's office. It asked him and Kavya to attend a small private meeting in Delhi. When they arrived, Modi greeted them warmly, placing a hand on Kavya's head and blessing. You have grown stronger, he said with a smile. Then he turned to Anil. I wanted you to meet someone in person. The door opened, and Sundar Pichai walked in. There was no media, no crowd, just the three of them, in a quiet room. Anil stood up quickly, unsure what to say. You don't need to thank me said I didn't do this alone. It was your kindness, years ago, that started everything. I just made sure it didn't get lost. They talked for a long time about life in the village, about Kavya's recovery, about how technology could reach even the most remote places. At the end, Modi said something that stayed with Anil forever. The world remembers big achievements, but what truly changes it are small acts of good that ripple outward. Today, you are the reason two grown men on opposite sides of the world worked together. Never forget that. When they left the meeting, Kavya squeezed her brother's hand. Baya, she whispered, I think kindness is like planting a seed. You never know when it will grow into a tree. Anil looked at her and smiled. And sometimes, it grows into a forest. Months later, back in their village, Anil started a small community fund to help anyone in urgent need of travel for medical care. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. And in quiet moments, he often thought about that dusty road from his childhood. when giving a stranger a pot of water seemed like nothing yet turned out to be everything, because sometimes the smallest kindness doesn't just save a moment, it saves a life.